Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source. Here today to talk about Primer. I have the two co-creators and writers joining me today, and we're going to get into why it took me so long to read it and all that stuff. But first, it's my pleasure to welcome Jen Muro and Thomas Krajewski to the show. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
You got it.
So, for those that don't recall, this was something that came out originally, the first graphic novel in 2020. My daughter read it right away, loved it, implored me to read it, wanted to come on and do a podcast about it. And I kept telling her, I'll read it, I'll read it, I'll read it. To my eternal shame, I did not read it till it came out in single issues, which I told you both the story when we met. So read read it when it came out in single issues, loved it, was like, oh my God, I went, apologized to her. I was wrong, whatever. But now you've had a second volume come out, Clashing Colors, which we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But let's start with kind of the elevator pitch of the story and who Primer is. I'm going to put you on the spot, Thomas. Why don't you tell our listeners that might not be familiar who Primer is, what it's all about?
Yeah, sure. In short, she's a 13-year-old girl, and she has 33 different body paints, and each body paint has a different power. So she has 33 superpowers, and she can wear three paints at a time, no more. Otherwise, she overloads. So with 33 powers and 33 paints, she has like 5,000 combinations of powers that she can use to fight crime. So again, yeah, she's a 13-year-old girl and lives in Washington, D.C., comes from a foster home situation. So she's just trying to like become something and make something of herself. She was a little bit of I don't want to say a bad seed. She's a good kid, but she's a little misguided. So by becoming a superhero, she hopes to make up for that kind of a thing. It's a little bit of a redemption character and story arc.
Yeah, what's so interesting, she is so many different things, which I really appreciate. So many times books aimed at younger readers can tend to be maybe a little oversimplified.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, Jen, the decision, the thought process going into so many different powers, which leads to so many different combinations, but also who she is herself, coming from a situation where her father's a criminal and he's in jail and being adopted and not being able to make friends easily. She's so many different things. And so there's a sense of realism. Can you talk a little bit about the initial planning, like how you were kind of developing her as a character and deciding to make her so complicated?
I think initially we kind of wanted her to definitely always have a sense of humor, to have that kind of, I mean, the mildest version of Deadpool you can ever imagine. So
Yes.
without the speaking to the audience or anything, but just that kind of hint of sarcasm, along with creativity and trying to be confident in herself. I think that's something we always wanted. And obviously the joking is a defense mechanism for her foster life and and that upbringing but along with that, she's a very kind and caring person deep down, and she wants to be a good person. She does not want to be like her dad. So I think it came out of I think we always wanted that humor there, right, Tom? I think that was always
Yeah, like you said, it's a defense mechanism. Yeah, yeah, and as I was saying, yeah, it really is. She's trying to redeem herself. I felt like Jen and I talked about this. We're like, well, they're kind of like the best stories, and then what Jennifer and I was learning, like screenwriting classes, that like some of the best stories are redemption stories where someone has to like try to make up for what either they think they did was bad or what it's just that's kind of like where her backstory came from with her dad, because Primer is a really good kid, but she has a bad father, so she kind of associates herself with her bad father. So that's kind of where we want to put that drama in and make her a little more complicated than your usual, not your usual characters, but just what, as you were saying, Jace, like oversimplified kids characters.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing about Ashley. You understand, we've seen her go through some tough times. Maybe she's been acting out at school or what have you. But as you learn her backstory, she's adopted, her father's in prison, what have you. You kind of understand, she hasn't had it easy. So you can see that. But in that first volume, you do see her heart and you do see that she cares and she is trying to make a connection. And maybe she just hasn't had the right foster family yet. And that's kind of the journey you take her on.
Right.
So with that first volume coming out, as a kind of a one-shot graphic novel in 2020, Tom, did you get a lot of feedback from kids about Ashley and her being relatable, and maybe even kids that were adopted or in the foster system? Were you hearing from those kids that, hey, I can relate to this?
I did, and because when we were doing research for this, we had talked to one of my old friends who was an intern at a studio that I worked at, and she had like this really kind of horrible backstory where she was a foster kid, and she, finally found the right family, and she became like this happy, like really, full of life person. But we wanted to make sure that what we were doing with Ashley wasn't like just a made up thing. So we had to like run these things by my friend, and so when fans who were in the foster system read it, they did reach out to us and say, yes, this is, fairly similar to what we go through. And it was kind of cool to see, an imaginative version of what could have been if superpowers were involved in their own foster lives, kind of a thing. So, yeah.
How gratifying was that, Jen, to know that you had kind of done it the right way?
I mean, I always like to be careful with that, with any project I do. The realism is just so important because there's nothing worse than someone reading going, this is so off base. And like, my God, clearly they didn't know anything about it. So yeah, it was super important.
Well, the artist on the project, Gretel Lusky, I think, again, kind of lightning in the bottle, and part of the reason that this was so successful, because it wasn't a situation where just anybody could do it. You want to get, again, the right sensibility, because yes, it's aimed at younger readers, but as we're saying, there's a sense of realism to it, but also the colors. I mean, it's right there in the name. Primer, her powers come from the paints and what have you. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about bringing Gretel onto the project, Jen, and kind of how that initial collaboration worked and how it's evolved over time?
I think it's funny because I think DC, she contacted DC about it. I think she really wanted to do this project. I think she had heard about it, and I think she even did a test, and to go, I really want this to be mine. Like I want in on this. And I mean, my God, we're so lucky. She didn't need to prove herself on that one, right, Tom? I think that's sort of how it went down, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, she may have reached out to DC. As you said, all I know is DC came to us saying that this artist really wants to do the book, as you just said. And I mean, that's to DC's credit. They were like, yeah, this artist, Gretel, is amazing. And they knew she would be perfect for the book. So I think they vetted some other artists as well. And, we all kind of agreed that this was the best one. And yeah, Gretel's artwork is, instrumental in having brought this character to life and made her so popular in the first place. So yeah, as you said, it's kind of lightning in a bottle. We got very lucky, very fortunate.
Yeah. Well, from that initial success of, like, did you know right away that you were going to have multiple volumes of this, or was it the initial success of the first volume that kind of led to subsequent volumes, which obviously, like I said, volume 2 out now, everybody, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's more volumes coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think, DC, since this was a brand new character, they weren't sure, what her future would be. And so I think with that first book, they kind of treated it, in a way where, okay, she could kind of be on the outskirts of the DC universe. And if she's a bomb, maybe we won't use her anymore. But luckily she was a hit, and they're like, okay, now she can be in the DC universe. So once that first book started doing so well, that's when they came to us and said, hey, we want to do some more. And Jennifer and I had already been talking about possible sequels, because I think we kind of knew from the very beginning that we had something, pretty special and unique there. We always felt pretty positively about that character and story. So when DC asked us for, more sequel ideas, we were pretty ready to go.
I think, I mean, look, it came out June 2020. So it was like the worst timing imaginable.
Oh, yeah.
All the support was canceled. Everything was canceled. I think we were worried it was going to go into oblivion. Yeah. And the fact that it has done so well at that time period and has continued to, I can't imagine what it would have been like if it was normal. Like I who knows what it would have been. And it's still doing wonderful. It's just amazing, like, how well and how consistent it has been since then, considering the initial time period it was released.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jace.
No, go ahead, Thomas.
I was going to say, sometimes I think, I wonder if like the pandemic helped us, because everybody was stuck at home reading. So I guess it could have gone either way. Maybe it would have been even a bigger of a hit if there wouldn't have been the pandemic, or maybe it would have been less of a hit. But I think people really found this book at the right time.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it could have went either way. I'm not sure. All I know is it's been consistent, and
we've been number one like quite a few times of DC's graphic novel bestsellers, so we're pretty proud about that. And yeah, I often track its progress on the charts because I gotta know.
Yeah, and well deserved. So again, everybody came out in 2020 as the initial, but then like I said, I finally made time to read it when it came out in the singles, which was I think March of last year, I want to say.
This is your daughter who asked you to read it, right?
Yeah, she had read it in 2020 when it first came out, because I was kind of keeping abreast of the YA stuff that was coming out. I was like, oh, I think this is something that you might like, and she devoured it. Asked me to read. You know, she's read it like, I don't know, probably a dozen times. But yeah, finally when it came out as singles is when I kind of discovered it. And I'm curious, did it seem like it had a little bit of a resurgence? Were there other people that you heard of like me that read it as the singles when it was divided into the four separate issues?
Not so much the four separate issues. I think a lot of it was really the graphic novel. And I've heard from other people who have said, yes, there are a lot of fathers, mostly fathers actually, who said their kid came to them and said, you have to read this. It's so funny. And this girl, kicks butt. So mainly with the graphic novel, I mean, I think we had less copies of the floppies that were out there. We had like tons of the graphic novel, and that's kind of what people really wanted. It was the full self-contained story. So I think that's where we heard most of it. Yeah.
And I mean, it was nice to have new covers from Gretel, though. And I think that was like, oh wow, this is pretty. So it was really nice to. I think that was a draw just on its own thing, just because obviously the story had been told, but gorgeous new covers from Gretel was really great to see.
Yeah. So everybody, that first volume, whichever way you prefer, if you want to get it as a collected, you can. It's available. If you want to hunt down the single 4 issues, you can do that as well. And then when it came to doing the second one, Clashing Colors, which was also amazing and a worthy follow-up, came out as singles first, but just was collected recently, November 5th, everybody. So it's available as a collected edition that way as well. But I want to ask you, Jen, coming back. Okay. So now you're going to do a second volume. And like I said, there's subsequent volumes as well. You and Thomas getting back together to write the second volume for Ashley. Was it like right back on the bike, just hit the ground running, or was there a little bit of, okay, what are we going to do this time?
God, it was such a while ago. I'm trying to even remember. I think it was fine. I think it was always good. I mean, I'm always going to have a little bit of difference of an opinion. I think because of it's not a difference of opinion as much as additions, especially for the girlfriend, the female friendship in this one.
Yeah.
I think that was more of like, I don't know if this would happen as much, or I think Ashley should say this or instead, or we have to be careful with Ashley here because she might come out off as a jerk a little bit. Or because Tom loves to push it, which is great, but I'm always a little reserved about that stuff. But
the voice of reason.
Yeah.
Like, that was very similar to the first book. So I think that it was only a little more plussed because of the Teen Titans.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like we'd already thought out like a bunch of sequel stories in advance, and then when DC said, "Hey, we want this sequel, can you put the Teen Titans in it?" And we're like, "Of course we can put the Teen Titans in it." We'd originally, our very first pitch for Primer when we went to DC with this character was like, "Hey, so we have the story where you have this brand new character named Primer, and she wants to join the Teen Titans." And they said, "No, you can't have the Teen Titans in your very first book." And then when the sequel came around, they said, "Hey, can you put them in there?" And we're like, "Yes, we can." So we kind of retrofitted our original story from the actual DC pitch to this. So we kind of did hit the ground running, but now that we were kind of since we'd already had a story thought out for the second book, we kind of pushed that one aside to start all over again with the Deathstroke and Teen Titan stuff. So, but it was really fun, very easy for us, I think, because we have so much fun doing it.
Yeah, it was a good story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, the other thing that it does is it really shows that there's no reason Primer can't be in the main DCU. We know these YA books are kind of live in their own little world, but I mean, and I have no sway and no pull and whatever, but from my lips to God's ears, I hope what a perfect time with what we have going on coming out of Absolute Power with Justice League Unlimited that Mark Waid's doing, where everybody's a member of the Justice League. And so, like, in a dream scenario, she would get a chance to go up to the new satellite and take a tour and feel like she was part of it. I can only imagine kind of the smart remarks and what a scene that would make. That would be fantastic.
We'll see what happens.
I would love her personality intermixed with that, even if she didn't stay there. Just to
yeah.
A quick visit. I would love to see the interaction between the other characters and her opinions of these other people.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be really, really
all
fun.
The adults, because she's only met the Teen Titans and Teen Titans Academy in our book, but she hasn't met like Batman or Superman or anybody. And that'd be fun to see how she interacts with them with her snarkiness.
And
her snarkiness, her powers. I could see her totally putting her foot in her mouth, which is relatable, like who of us wouldn't, when you're faced with these, almost godlike beings. Well, for those that are fans of Primer and are listening in because they want some kind of hints of what's to come, we mentioned there's a couple more volumes coming, and we know it's going to be a little bit before they come, but we don't want to give too much away. But what can you tease about what's coming up? Where would you like to see, or where are you going to take Ashley in the future?
Well, we actually, nothing is set in stone yet, so we'll see what happens. But I can assure you that Jennifer and I have many more stories for Primer to tell. So there could be some things on the horizon. Jace, I know we talked in person, but yeah.
But I think we have stuff. I mean, even if God willing, yes. But even if there wasn't, we always had like a bunch of books in mind. I mean, that's something we always sort of planned out. Now, will that shift depending? It might be. I think we've even we've veered a little from some stuff we had planned. I think we need to we'll be revisiting that and see what happens. Right, Tom?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously, if you read the second book, you see we kind of leave it open for another sequel, which is what I think we tend to do because we like that serialization. And Primer is a deep character, and she has a pretty, a deep relationship with her new foster family that she loves, and then obviously her birth father, who she has, doesn't really like so much. So we have a lot more to tell, and we have all these different scenarios we are looking forward to telling. So yeah.
Yeah, and I want to kind of close with this too, because we talked about her relatability, and you all mentioned how you want to make sure that it's kind of accurate in terms of being realistic for foster kids and kids that are adopted and what have you. The emotionality of it is not something that I necessarily expected. I'm not adopted, but yet I was kind of connecting with Ashley, and I especially really loved what you did about why she was calling her foster dad or adopted father or dad, but not, it was calling her mother by her first name. I just thought that was so inspired. So how aware are you of kind of the emotionality and the balance you want to strike when you're building out the story? Because again, if it's aimed at, younger readers like, my daughter, that's something in those years, I'm sure you both recall, emotions that can get the better of you. It's something that, in that age, it's a bit of a struggle. So is it something you're aware of when you're building the story and you want to be careful and make sure it's genuine?
I think, Tom, it's so funny, Tom, you have such a young sensibility. Like, I know you're not a 13-year-old girl, but like, my God, sometimes you think like
I will be
more than me. And so like, you just have a juvenile sense in the best way, not in you're juvenile, but like in a really relatable way, just the way you think. And it really does help this. So Tom, you're picking up credit for some of her kind of leanings about stuff. And those touches really do help, because like you do have that mindset, and it does make it quite.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, I think, Jen and I always like those characters who are like very three-dimensional. So giving that correct like combination of heart plus like wacky comedy and action, it just seems to make sense to both of us. Like we could tell any kind of superhero story where Primer goes and fights a bad guy, and that is cool and awesome. I think those are great stories, but I think by giving it that emotional punch and kind of balancing it just makes for a more, I don't know, well-rounded, interesting story that we can keep growing, building upon. So
Yeah, and hopefully, if this continues, we'll see what that growth is of her foster
yeah.
parents, and how is she going to start treating Yuka? Is she going to treat her differently? Are things going to change? And how does that grow? And so that's why we always hope there's more.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, you bring so much emotion and so much fun to the story. You can't help but fall in love with Ashley. And when us as readers, when we care about the character, we're that much more invested in the story, and everything just clicks. So thank you both for taking the time. Thank you both for, along with Gretel, for Primer. I really, really love the story. Obviously, it's something I get to share with my daughter, which is amazing. So thanks so much for talking to me today.
You
Thank
got it.
you. Thank you so
Thanks.
much, man.